Welcome to ChiroSphere, where we talk about all things chiropractic and some things not so chiropractic. I'm Dr. Ray Foxworth, your host for ChiroSphere and CEO of Chiro Health USA, the network that works for chiropractic. Today, we welcome Dr. Glenn Jaffe to the ChiroSphere podcast. Dr. Jaffe, CEO and president of Jaffe Chiropractic in Charlotte, North Carolina, has been practicing chiropractic since 2003. He's also the founder and CEO of Bold Azure Experiential Leadership and Consulting for Chiropractors. That's a mouthful. A dedicated advocate for the profession, Dr. Jaffe is past president and current legislative chair of the North Carolina Chiropractic Association and vice chair of Backpack. You'll hear more about that later. It's the first super PAC for pro-chiropractic candidates. Today, we'll learn about his journey and insights on leadership and chiropractic advocacy. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Dr. Foxworth. Happy to be here. Excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, what inspired you to pursue a career in chiropractic? What's your story?
You know, I come from a family that was really big in healthcare. I have several dentists in my family, including my father. My mother was a nurse anesthetist before she retired. My grandmother was a recovery room nurse. My parents, along with my grandparents, started and were instrumental in running the local first aid squad or ambulance squad in the town where my grandparents were along the shore in New Jersey. And so I was always around healthcare and caring for people. And, very commonly growing up, the conversation at dinner would revolve around my brother and me quizzing my father on each patient that he saw in his dental office that day. What did you do on the first patient, Dad? And he would tell us and everything. So just the inquisitiveness, curiosity, coupled with that was really there from an early age. And then as I got into high school and college, I realized that I wanted to get into the ambulance business. And so I went and got my EMT certification in New Jersey. A lot outside of the major cities, I think it still is volunteer only. And so I had the opportunity to serve as a volunteer EMT in the first aid squad that my grandparents started back in the 60s and 70s with my parents. And that was really exciting. And so I kind of got involved with all that. I was an athletic trainer in high school, helped out with that. And so when I was looking at college and deciding on what to do, I thought I had found an interest in being a nurse anesthetist, kind of like my mom did. And being able to get into healthcare, not being a physician, not having to go to school for, 1,000 years before you get out and actually do anything and make a living. So I decided to go to nursing school in undergrad. And about 2 years into the program, just a series of events and things happened and made me realize that nursing was not what I wanted to do. And as it turned out, I was going home for Thanksgiving and went to go see my chiropractor and get adjusted. And he was asking me, how's school going? How's nursing school going? And I said, well, I don't think that's what I want to do. And he's like, well, what are you thinking? And I'm like, well, maybe physical therapy, maybe medical school. I don't really know. And trying to figure that out. And he said, well, have you thought about becoming a chiropractor? And I looked at him and I said, no, I really hadn't. And so he took me to lunch and started telling me about, his journey and how he got into it. And so he went to National in Chicago. And so my undergrad, Valparaiso University, is located in Northwest Indiana, which, if you don't have a map in front of you, is about an hour away from Chicago. And so I looked at that and I looked at a couple other schools and realized that this was a great opportunity. I wouldn't have to move very far after I get done undergrad. From what I understood chiropractic at that point in my career, it kind of aligned with my understanding of health and the body. And so I ended up going to school there. And that's kind of how I initially, that's how I got into chiropractic and graduated. Graduated in 2002 and here we are.
Let's face it, beats the hell out of being in somebody's mouth all day.
My father absolutely.
Or dealing with bedpans as a nurse.
This is true. My father explicitly told me not to be a dentist. And so I appreciate that.
So you and I have a lot in common. We've both been involved almost from the get-go. I think it's just part of our nature. What was your journey like with getting involved with the North Carolina Chiropractic Association?
It's interesting. There was a big leadership vacuum in the state association about the time I started getting involved. And I just started showing up to things, and I don't remember why, but I guess, I'm almost 50 now. I'm 48. And I like to think that my generation, we were the last ones that we just joined the state association because that's what you did. And so I was a member of the NCCA from the get-go, getting my license here in North Carolina, and I would try and be involved and go to things, and I just showed up to things. And so somebody asked me if I would serve on an insurance relations committee as the chair of it. I'm like, okay, sure, why not? I don't know what that means, but let's do it. And this was probably, gosh, 14, 15 years ago now, at least at this point. And so I did that for a little while, and then I was able to get elected to the board. At the time, I think um, as a district director was the way you could get on the board. And so I worked my way up into some of the officer positions. And as I started to do more of that board work of the association and realizing that the state association was so important to the business and the practice of chiropractic in our state here in North Carolina, but of course of every state, I realized that I really had a passion for it, to be an advocate for the profession. And so I saw the opportunity that, hey, eventually one day we'll have the opportunity to be president. And so as soon as I kind of realized that, um, I started to kind of change my approach on how I was serving on the board. And I started to strategize, well, how, when I get to the point of being president, my opportunity to be elected president, how can I do the best job that I think I can? And what do I want to accomplish once I get there? So I started to really pay attention to leaders that were leading ahead of me. I started to seek out people who had served and kind of cycled off the board, and really tried to connect with people that showed with their actions leadership and commitment to the profession and commitment to the NCCA. And so I started to surround myself with them and learn from them. And I started to really sharpen my leadership sword and work my way up as president. And once I became president of the NCCA, whenever you're president, you kind of have a decision. You can either be an active president or you can be a passive president. And I knew that I wanted to be an active president. I didn't want to just get there and just do something. I wasn't doing it for the accolades. I wanted to do it because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to see things change. Not for the sake of change, but because I wanted to improve things. Given that trust of everybody in the association to allow me to do that, I kind of took that as a little bit of a mandate. And so the first year, 2019, when I was president, my goal was to get in and to actually change our bylaws. And so if anyone listening to this has ever been involved with an association or a board and you know about bylaws, you know how dry and potentially mind-numbing bylaw revisions can be. We had a 53-page bylaw document that had pages, yeah, pages in it that were, it was a digital document at this point, but there were scanned pages in it. I'm pretty sure we're done on a typewriter in the 70s.
IBM Selectric. I had one.
Yeah. So they just kept adding pages to it over the years. So, with some help with some books and studying some things, and we brought in an attorney who helps associations with their bylaws. We were able to get down to 12 pages, which is again, if you're familiar with bylaws, it's a much more
That's
reasonable thing
amazing.
to keep wrap your hands around. And so a lot of the work we did with that, I wanted to modernize and bring in best practices on how we did things, because for so long, I think a lot of state associations, they have good intentions with the leaders, but they do things because they think they know the best way. And while that, again, that's good, there really are experts out there, and there are people who study these kinds of things. And I wanted to make sure that we were doing the best way out there that was kind of a best practices, not just what seemed to make sense. And so we changed the structure of our elections, how board members were elected, how officer positions were elected, and do things to strengthen the governance of the association. And so I was really proud of that work. It wasn't as hard or difficult to get people to buy into these changes as I thought it would be, which was really neat. And then the second year of my presidency, COVID hit.
Lovely. You're the captain of the ship.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's called the Titanic, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, there's it was such an interesting time, obviously, for all of us. But we immediately went into almost crisis mode as far as what we need to do to communicate to our members and to hold their hand and let them know that we were there for them. And so it was almost every week I was doing a video that we were sending out, and utilizing our social media channels. But it just made me so proud of the work that the association has done over the years, because we've all heard stories about some states, unfortunately, weren't able to get themselves designated as essential. um, and they had to close. Kentucky and Colorado come to mind. And so, fortunately, the association had the wherewithal to do that ahead of time. So, very proud of that fact that our association has a long track record of protecting and advocating for our licenses in this state. And so it came out of that, and eventually cycled off the board. And um, so that's kind of
That was a
that's where
journey,
I,
huh?
yeah. And so doing all that work, I realized that I had a really big passion for the legislative part of it. And so I've continued on as our legislative chair since 2017 or 16, I think. So I still do that, and I'm still involved on our PAC board as well.
So, just as a word of encouragement to maybe some of the younger doctors that are listening to this, um, I highly encourage you to get involved with your state associations. I mean, they are the reason you have a license to practice, and they help you maintain that. And the I've often told people ask, well, what have you really gotten out of chiropractic? And what I have found for myself is I get out of chiropractic what I put into it. And there are a lot of people that are disgruntled about how things are. And, oh, if somebody would just fix this and just fix that, and they end up sitting on the sideline. Sidebar, 75% of our profession doesn't belong to any association. That's sad. Um, so kudos to you for stepping up and saying yes. And I could almost hear myself when you were saying, hey, would you volunteer to do this? And yes. And then I find out what it really entails. Um, but that's half the battle, Glenn, is people showing up, saying yes, getting involved instead of sitting on the sideline, bitching and moaning about how things are and waiting for someone to change it. Um, which kind of brings to thought the chiropractic strategic plan, but that's a conversation for another day. A bunch of people have gotten sick and tired of sitting on the sidelines
Yeah,
and waiting for things to happen. So I know you're also in. You talked about being the legislative chair, and I know that part of the strategic plan that we're both volunteers for has established what's called the backpack. So, how about share with everybody what backpack is and why it's important for the profession to contribute to it?
absolutely. Well, the first thing is it's kind of a fun name. Uh, whenever I start talking about it, my kids always start singing the Doris song, which is kind of funny. But backpack is an acronym. It's Better Access to Chiropractic Political Action Committee, if you're not aware. And so a little civics lesson, if you will. There's two kinds of PACs, and PACs have to do with financial support for campaigns. And so a lot of states have a PAC at a state level. And what that is you collect monies, it has to be personal monies from members of a specific group, or in our case, in the state association. And then we can use that to contribute to political campaigns. And that helps, it doesn't buy votes, which is a big misconception. PAC money donations buys you access, it buys you attention, and it gives you the opportunity to have conversations and build relationships. And that last part, the building relationships part, is really the key. And so a super PAC or a federal PAC, which is what backpack is a similar but not the same, where it helps us with relationship building. The way it does that is a little different. So a federal PAC or a super PAC is able to take unlimited amounts of money, which a state level PAC is capped at, I believe, $5,400, and maybe changed a little bit. And that all has to be personal funds. A super PAC or federal PAC is unrestricted in the amount of money it takes, and it can be corporate money. And so there's a lot more opportunity for the chiropractic profession now that we have a super PAC to really get involved with federal races. And when we get involved with federal races and help elect pro chiropractic candidates, we can really magnify the amount of impact we have. Just to give you perspective, the hospital associations, the drug companies, the national physician groups, national PTA, they've all had federal PACs for a long time, and they're very, very well funded. Obviously, you can imagine the hospitals and the pharmaceutical industry. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but now we have the vehicle to do it. And so backpack is an extremely, extremely important piece of the voice of the profession at a national level.
So, and as I understand it, the backpack has already had some significant wins. How about share that with with the audience?
Yeah, we were so excited to be able to make a difference in an election in Virginia. So last fall, we identified a congresswoman from Virginia in the second district. Her name is Elaine Kiggins, and she is Jen Kiggins. I'm sorry, and she was running against an opponent, a Democratic opponent. And so we identified her race as one that we wanted to get involved with for a couple reasons. She has, by her actions, supported chiropractic in a couple ways. She signed on as a co-sponsor of the Medicare modernization bill, which is something that chiropractic has been working on for a long time. And she also has been really, really instrumental in raising the issue and trying to find solutions to the problem that the VA system has been causing with not just chiropractic, but for a lot of veterans in general. And so we were fortunate to have Dr. Michelle Rose, who's the president of the UVCA, has a connection with her office in Virginia Beach. And so we were able to use our connections throughout the profession to realize that we would be able to support her election, her campaign, through the backpack. And so one of the ways that the way that a federal PAC works is that you cannot coordinate with the candidate. So we couldn't call up Kiggins' office and say, "Hey, do you want us to run an ad for you?" or anything like that. So instead, well, it's called an independent expenditure. So we created the ad, we created the copy for it, the script. We put it together, and we bought the advertising placement, and we spent money that we raised. And so we were able to run this video, 30-second video, uh, during the height of the campaign season in October. So it made a really big difference. It was seen all across her district. And to give you some perspective on how impactful it was, we had an amazingly high open rate. We had an amazingly high viewership rate. Most people followed through when they clicked on this video or when they were shown it. They followed through to the end. It was almost over 80%
That's
completion rate, which
amazing.
is unheard of. And before the election, the prognosticators put her as a +2 to win her election. Well, it turns out she won by over 4 points. So we can confidently say that because of our efforts, we helped to contribute to her winning bigger than she was supposed to. So chiropractic deserves a huge pat on the back for this one, but we've got a lot of work to do.
I think that's another thing, especially for younger doctors or any doctors. There is nothing more important than cultivating relationships with legislators. And when is the time to do that? Not when they're in Washington, but when they're running for dog catcher, because there's usually a pathway that they follow. I'll just tell you a short story about how impactful that's been for me and um, in our relationships. We had a guy that ran here in Mississippi, and we literally worked our tails off stuffing envelopes, sending out mailers to people. This is when people actually, before social media, there's actually these people that actually deliver letters to people's houses. So we got involved with that. I was president of our association at that time. And, I put together a letter to the profession asking them to send it out to their patients and basically saying, we're your family chiropractor. We don't normally get involved in politics, but this is a really important position. And we want someone that's going to fight for, your rights as a patient and particularly in Medicare and at the VA. So the guy gets elected and, could not have been a stronger ally. And I'll never forget the first time when I walked into his office in Washington, his chief of staff is there and he introduces me and he says, "This is Ray Foxworth. Give him whatever he wants." And I'm going like, wow. And the guy said, "Well, what do you need, Doc?" And so we started talking about the Medicare bill and some other things. And you don't realize the impact that something as simple. We were the first association to endorse this guy as well, so it made a huge impact. So the fun part of the story is when I was leaving his office, he said, I told him, I said, "Greg, there is one thing that I want," and he said, "What is it?" "Anything." And he had this neat coaster on his desk that was from the U.S. House of Representatives. Had his name on it. I said, "I want that coaster." And he said, "Oh, you can get them down in the gift shop." I said, "No, Greg, I want that coaster." And sure enough, he gives me the coaster, wrote a Bible verse on the back of it, very religious guy. And it's like, I got everything I wanted.
That's awesome.
But that would have never happened, and he wouldn't have been such a strong advocate for us if we hadn't been the ones that showed up early on. So it's great to develop the relationships once they're already there, but nothing is as impactful as getting involved when they're at the grassroots and when they're trying to climb whatever ladder they're climbing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of
Well,
the things I hear when when I talk to some of our members, especially the younger docs, about getting involved and telling them about these things with relationships, they always kind of have the same question about, well, I don't know what to say to them. I don't know what to do. I'm intimidated. They're the elected official. And I don't know, some states, like in North Carolina, it's a part-time position. Legislatures part-time, not that they're part-time, but they're just like all of us. And this is what I tell the younger doctors is that, again, they're not celebrities. All they did was win a popularity contest. So they're really no different than you or me, but they want to hear from us because we are even more important than just run-of-the-mill constituent. We are a small business owner. We employ people. We contribute to the health and well-being of the communities that they represent. So they are extremely interested in learning about us. And that's the thing is we have something to offer them. We're not just going there looking to build a relationship. And if you go into any relationship, obviously, and you're trying to get something out of it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be um, disingenuous. But if you go in and trying to build that relationship, knowing that you can serve them or do something for them, be a resource for them, be available to them, that's what's going to help you build that relationship. And then, like you said, just show up and be there and be seen. And that way you get to be familiar with them and get involved. And then you can be a representative of your state association and deliver PAC checks. And then they really like you.
or like back in the day, back in the 60s, I can neither confirm nor deny that I rode with my parents from Yazoo City, Mississippi to Jackson, Mississippi with a brown bag with cash in it. Um, that was probably before a lot of the rules and regulations on donations, but boy, let's just say it bought us some access and understanding. It did
Yeah.
not buy any votes.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I hear, Ray, you may have heard this too, is, oh, I don't like politics. I don't want to talk politics. That's inflammatory. Well, the thing about it is it's not a partisan thing. And we're not going in there with any kind of agenda other than what's best for chiropractic. And when we can, as a profession, huddle around that principle, we can get a lot more done.
Well, hang tight while we take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Welcome back to our podcast with Dr. Glenn Jaffe. With your role involved as a legislative chair, what changes have you been able to bring about in your state?
So,
You did the bylaws thing, but outward facing,
yeah.
what changes have you been able to see happen?
So a lot of the work we do legislatively um, is defense. Unfortunately, most people don't realize all the defense that the state associations play. And I'll give you an example. Here in North Carolina, we had a bill that was introduced every session to try and allow PTs to have direct access without a referral. And obviously, there's clinical reasons why we don't think that's a good idea. There's business reasons why it probably doesn't make sense. And, there's other reasons too. And every time this bill would get introduced, we would be able to use our connections and our relationships to have the bill squashed in a committee or to go to assigned to the committee where bills go to die, those kinds of things. And for a long time we were able to do this. And that stuff doesn't make headlines and it's not sexy, but the fact is that this bill never made it out where it needed to go, was a good thing. And it protected our patients and everything else. Well, eventually the way that the relationships that we had that we were able to use to do this changed, and the position that this legislator was in was no longer in the position to be able to do that for us anymore. And eventually the bill passed and it got into place. Well, it comes to turn out that the bill didn't really affect anything anyway and whatnot. But there's all these other, times where we have to play defense and we have to do things behind the scenes with connections and relationships and have conversations to make sure that these bills either don't get to a vote or that the correct changes get into the language of these bills if they do get passed. Recently, the state of North Carolina was able to pass a bill with the NCCA's help to allow full preceptorship participation here in the state, which is an enormously huge thing for us. Up until this bill came out, preceptors were not allowed to adjust in our state. And so there really wasn't a lot of opportunity for them to learn like they should here. But also it was a kind of a barrier to keep potential doctors from coming to our state. And so we were able to educate legislators on why it was safe for this to happen, the programs that these colleges put in place, and how they vet the doctors who become preceptors in the state. But also, we were able to educate them on the financial and business benefits of bringing preceptors to the state, because now they come, they get a flavor of what it's like to practice in North Carolina. And hey, like we talked about earlier, this might be a new small business that opens up. This might be a business that employs other North Carolina residents. And so there's a lot of factors that go into these kinds of situations. And so I think I'm really proud of the fact that the NCCA and the way that we do our legislative work has really matured and grown and gotten a lot more savvy than it had been, 10, 15 years ago. Um, there's other bills that we're trying to get movement on, school physicals. We're trying to do some tort reform to improve the lien situation with personal injury. We've got a couple other technical bills that always try and come up. We call it the billboard bill, but every session there seems to be a bill that somebody puts out there that anybody in healthcare has to wear their credentials on this certain size name tag for everybody to
Yeah, we
see,
went through that.
so that the patient's not confused that you're not who you say you are, and it never. But we have to, these are things that we do, and it's okay. So those are, I think, the other biggest challenge from the legislative side of things that we try and do, kind of involve our state pack, and it's getting our members to realize that they need to contribute to it. Um, that the time to dump money into the pack is not when the house is on fire. The time to dump money into the pack is before the fire starts. And again, I'll go back to what we talked about with the super PAC. North Carolina, the Hospital Association and the Medical Society are extremely well funded, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're just not there. And we can get closer to it, but we just need more participation, and that can help as well. So that's one of the things that we're really working on.
I think it's important to point out, even though we may be, quote, in competition with a hospital association or the PT association, yeah, they got the numbers and they got the money. Um, but the common denominator with them and with us is the importance of having the relationship. And while we may not be able to give as much as, someone else, if you follow your line of thought, we're not buying votes, we're buying access and the ability to have a conversation. So even a little bit helps. It's not like you've got to have the war chest of the American Medical Association or Big Pharma, but you got to have something, and you got to just the willingness to show up and to contribute what you can really goes a long way. So, and I've heard a lot of pessimism over the years. Oh, hell, you're never going to compete with the hospital association, or bullshit. You can. You just have to contribute. You got to show up and you got to be involved. And, we all know the saying, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so by having a pack or having a backpack gives you a reason to show up, gives you a reason to be involved. So, dollars and pennies and coins, just throw it all in there, because it does add up. And again, I get frustrated, Glenn, when I think about how many in our profession, out of frustration with how things are or how things have been, just sit on the sideline and ride it out. And my gosh, the things that we could accomplish if we could get the majority of the profession involved, whether it's national level, state level, or preferably both. What would you say to one of those docs that's been sitting on the sideline, not involved, frustrated with the way things are? What would you say to get them to say, "All right, I'm gonna get involved. I'm gonna do something."
Well, I've tried both ways of doing it, being nice and being a little bit more pointed. And I guess it depends on who I'm talking to, but trying to convey to them that no one else is going to come save us. No one else is going to carry our flag. No one else is going to do our work. It's up to us. And if you sit on the sidelines and don't participate, there's a good chance that something's going to happen that you're not going to like, and it's going to directly affect what goes into your pocket. And that's going to affect your lifestyle. It's going to affect your ability to take care of your family. And it's going to affect the dreams that you have that you want to accomplish. And that short-sightedness of thinking about, oh, this is all something that this is not for me, or, somebody else will do it, whatever, that's selfish, because we're chiropractors and we serve people. But in order to serve people, we have to take care of ourselves first. And the way that we take care of this profession is through political advocacy, and to be a supporter of this profession, and to get off the sidelines and do things. And if you don't want to do anything like go meet with your legislators when your state association has legislative day, or you don't feel like going to your district meetings, then take some action with your credit card or your checkbook. And
Do something.
I always advocate, the minimum that you should be doing is I think everybody can contribute, at least 3 visits a month to this process, right? If you do $50 to your state PAC, $50 a month to your state association membership, which is probably about what most states charge, and $50 to backpack, 3 visits a month out of however many you see a month is going to ensure that you are able to do what you want to do with your life, not just with your chiropractic practice. Because if somebody takes away your ability to practice tomorrow because some law changed, because you and the rest of your colleagues sat on the sidelines and wouldn't do the work, what are you going to do? And I hate to use fear, right? We're not in the fear business of getting people to do things, but sometimes that's really the only thing that can possibly happen. You know, if you really are wondering what I'm talking about, and you don't take me seriously, just go read what happened in Texas a few years ago. The
Okay.
medical society was scorching the earth in that state to try and remove some of the most foundational things that chiropractors do to practice in that state. And if it wasn't for the Texas Association, there'd be a lot of chiropractors crying right now, and
No
a lot of
doubt.
patients without their chiropractors.
Yeah, we actually got involved in that as a company when I saw the postcards that they sent out that literally had a duck on it with quack over it, and the MDs uh, uh, on the opposing side. Man, that just ticked me off, and we started contributing to their pack. I don't practice there, but that old saying, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." Well, my thought was, what happens in Texas isn't going to stay in Texas. Um, Whether people realize it or not, there continues to be, despite the Wilk case that settled many years ago, there continues to be an effort to whatever degree they can contain chiropractic. And the most recent one that I heard that came out of one of their annual meetings was um, to really try to make it where the only people that could refer to themselves as a physician, was if you had an MD.
Mhm.
And that's a battle that we continue to see occurring in states. You think, well, why is that important? Well, let me just give you one small example. In our state many years ago, um, our state health plan made reference to they would cover services provided by a physician. Well, guess who wasn't included in the definition of a physician? Yet it was services that we can render, things that were in our scope of practice, and so it became critical that we were able to call ourselves chiropractic physicians, not because I wanted to step on the toes of an MD, but because that language and that terminology ends up being in a medical policy by the major payer in our state. And so, if you are one of those docs sitting on the sideline, you got to understand that in order, if you don't like the way the insurance companies are treating you, understand that their medical policy is developed by that company, but they also have to comply with the rules and regulations that the state imposes. And if we are able to be categorized as chiropractic physicians, now we're able to get reimbursed under a major medical policy that Blue Cross Blue Shield. So you got to connect the dots. You can't just complain about, well, I don't like Blue Cross's policy. You got to go back up river, so to speak, and figure out, well, how can we change that? You're not going to convince Blue Cross Blue Shield to do that. They can't do it because there's state language that says you're not. And again, you got to get down to the point where you're having the conversation with the legislators. Explain. I had a hell of a time trying to convince our legislators why chiropractors should be considered physicians. And, it takes some convincing and it takes some time. And quite frankly, it takes having access. So, I guess my request to the doctors that don't want to get involved in politics, I agree with you wholeheartedly. At least support those that are. No one can do everything, but everybody can do something. And doing nothing really, really isn't an option. So I got some just for fun questions for you. Who's your hero and why?
Well, you know, when I think about people that I admire, that I want to run into a building with, um, I think before I became a chiropractor, I would tell you that it was my grandfather. He served in World War II. He was a pilot, or excuse me, a mechanic, B-17s, B-24s. He actually worked on Jimmy Stewart's plane during the war. And so, growing up as a young man and being around him a lot, kind of idolized him and learned a lot from him about life. And I always remember him saying, make sure you put that tool back where you found it so you can find it the next time, stuff like that. Right. And then the other one is always, the right tool for the right job, because I can always hear him saying that to me when I'm trying to, saw a piece of wood with a screwdriver or something. And so I would definitely tell you my grandfather. But I think now as a chiropractor, I would say that my heroes would probably be some of the people that are in the forefront of our profession fighting right now. Um, and I would say probably lately, the one that I would say the most, and I know this is going to inflate his head even bigger than it is, and you're going to laugh when I tell you who it is. It's Jay Greenstein. And the reason I say Jay is because I don't know that there's anybody else out there in our profession right now who will take the filter off and tell you what he thinks about our profession. And we need more of that. We need that unbridled passion. We need that commitment. We need that. I don't care what you think, what I have to say, because what I'm going to tell you is the truth. And we need that. We need a lot more of that in our profession. And so I,
I
I would
would
say,
tend to agree with you. The
yeah,
last person I remember doing that as well as he does it is probably Lou Sportelli.
absolutely.
Lou is not bashful about telling you what he thinks and why you're wrong. And it is Jay's a warrior, much like Sportelli. And I think history will prove that out. He is certainly a close friend and mentor and inspiring to me as well. So, what's a talent that you have that most people don't know about?
Um, I really, really, really enjoy photography. And from a young age, my father introduced me to photography, and I learned how to shoot on a film camera. And then when I transitioned to digital once it became available. So, but I love to take pictures. I love to share my photography with people. And it's just such a hobby for me that I really enjoy. And whenever I travel, I try and um, just kind of document my trips in a way that give me pleasure and joy and pride in how I do that. So yeah,
That's neat.
probably that.
Well, thanks for spending some time with us today, Glenn, and thank you all for listening to the ChiroSphere podcast. Please subscribe and share the podcast with your friends. Let us know who you'd like to hear from in the future and what topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll do our best to get them on. And doctors, I'll tell you, if you're offering discounts of any kind in your office, you need to make sure you're not breaking state and federal rules and regulations on dual fee schedules, inducements, and anti-kickback violations, which can lead to serious fines and penalties. We can help eliminate these concerns by using our profitable discount strategy, which ensures that any discounts you offer are 100% compliant and, most importantly, profitable. It all starts with a no cost, no obligation phone call to find out if we can help you, like we have thousands of other doctors nationwide. Many of our doctors have seen a 20% increase in revenue and a 50% retention of patients who are part of the ChiroHealth USA network. Over the past 17 years, over 7,000 chiropractors have helped over 4 million patients get the care they need at a cost they can afford. If you want to increase your revenue, retention, and practice with more peace of mind, call us at 888-719-9990 or visit our website at chusa.com, that's CHUSA.com, to find out why ChiroHealth USA is the network that works for chiropractic and you. Make it a great day. Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate your time, friend.